Out of all the game developers and publishers out there, I still think my favorite probably is Maxis. And this was a company, a software developer created by Will Wright back in the late 1980s. He created a game called Raid on Bungling Bay. A simple flying shooter game where you fly around, shoot at targets, and you fly over cities, as it turns out, these little cities they would create. And as he was doing this, he realized that actually it was more fun to create the city that you'd ultimately be shooting at rather than flying around the helicopter or whatever. So that was the beginning of Maxis. Essentially, was with Sky Chase and then SimCity. And the idea was, he's like, well, it's kind of fun having this open-ended game. You create a city, and there's no real end game there. There's no way to completely win the game. You just play the game, right, and be creative and have fun with it. So he called them, basically a sandbox type game, or a software toy. And that was really the beginning of that sandbox kind of genre that still does very well today. I mean, there's a lot of games, hundreds of games available today that would be described as sandbox game, kind of open-ended. I don't know, I always really enjoyed those kinds of games because it allowed me just to kind of use my creativity, and being kind of a loner child, you didn't need anyone to play with. You can just use your imagination. It's great single player experience, and create whatever you want. So still has a very special place in my heart. Unfortunately, Maxis only lasted really, technically it lasted a couple of decades, up until like 2015 or so. It was closed down after the last SimCity was released, because that was largely a disaster. But I don't know, I consider the death of Maxis to really be when EA acquired Maxis in the late 1990s. So I thought I'd show you my Maxis collection, with the caveat that I'm really going to stop at the late 90s and really not go any further than that. So again, in my mind, that's kind of when Maxis, as Will Wright founded it, really disappeared and got consumed by EA, as so many other really talented software companies have over time. So I kind of want to start here, and that is, of course, with the Sim games. And SimCity kind of started it all, but over that following decade, Maxis produced a large number of games that you can see here, starting with the Sim title, Sim whatever. You also notice that there were quite a few re-releases, actually, and I don't have them all. I don't have every international version or anything like that, but I've got quite a few versions. Some of these, the earlier ones, like SimCity here, the very first release in 1989, had its own box. It's a smaller box than the later Sim boxes. You'll notice also that Sim Ant and Sim Earth, they came in these black boxes, because these are the first couple releases after SimCity, and they didn't really have a cohesive style yet. And I suppose with these black boxes, that's the direction they were going in. You'll also notice the earlier logo on these is a yellow ball with a kind of a blue and white label. That was later replaced by the crescent of the moon eclipse, I suppose. But yeah, they later re-released a number of these games, not all of them, but several of them as under the title Classics, right? So they, when they were producing newer games and so forth, when they would release a new Sim game, I guess they would come out with this re-release classic version. What's interesting, though, is that if you look at the dates on the boxes, it's pretty much released the same year as the original. So you have something like, Sim Farm here, and the classic release of Sim Farm. And my thought was, with the Sim Earth and the Sim Ant, at least, they wanted to take the boxes and update the design so that they match the other newer releases of the Sim titles by Maxis, which kind of makes some sense. Now, the only real difference I can detect between the original Sim releases and the Sim Classic releases is that the cover of the manual is in color in the original, and it's black and white, the Classic. So I imagine they saved a couple dollars doing that. You notice that I have several of these still in plastic. I've tried to get at least of the original versions a new unboxed, still in plastic, sealed copy, mainly just for posterity, though honestly, I think it's kind of fun to put all of the sealed copies together on a shelf and just kind of pretend for a couple seconds that, I'm shopping at Babbage's or EB Games or something like that back in the 90s, because, I don't know, that was always a very special time, being able to go to the mall, go to the software store, and pick out a game for my birthday or something like that. So really good memories associated with sim games in plastic. And by the mid 90s, you had a few to choose from. It's kind of exciting. SimCity and Sim Tower were always my favorite. I played those much more than any of these others. I'd say Sim Farm comes in next. A number of these titles, quite honestly, I didn't play a whole lot of. Sim Life I never really got into. Let's see, SimGolf. Never had really any reason to play that, since I don't enjoy golf, and I certainly didn't have any interest in that as a kid. Though I want to show you here that it's one of these boxes that did actually come with some extra stuff. This one actually came with golf balls in it. A few of these older sim games did actually come with some kind of physical toy or other item with it, which was kind of neat. Sim Isle, I did play a little bit of Sim Isle. Not a ton, though. I just didn't think it was all that fun. But I tend to think of it as being kind of the inspiration for the Tropico series, which I actually do enjoy quite a bit. I just felt that they did that game a lot better. And SimCopter, a few of these are just really add-ons for other games that I've got. SimCopter, and then I've also got Streets of SimCity as well, and those were add-ons for SimCity. Now, on the left side here, you'll notice I have some taller boxes that don't really fit in with the other ones. They do have that classic logo where it's a color, Sim in white, and then it's surrounded by some color. But then the title is kind of goofy. So we've got SimToon, SimPark, Sim Safari, and SimTown. And Sim Safari, maybe someone can enlighten me, but for whatever reason, this one the game box is the same height, but it's not quite as wide as the others. It's actually a little thicker, it looks like, but front to back, it's not quite as wide. Well, that's interesting. But anyway, you see ages 6 to 10, ages 8+, and plus you've got the Maxis logo with kids underneath it. So these were primarily for children. And by the time these came out, I was really too old. I mean, I've been playing SimCity for years, and so SimTown wasn't of any interest to me. It's kind of a simplified version of SimCity. And then Sim Safari, SimPark, and SimTunes, which is pretty interesting. I just got this one on eBay. I guess you create creatures or something that play music. And I was fortunate enough to get a sealed copy of this game, but there was actually a version that came with a harmonica, and I don't have that one, and it's actually on my list of sim games that I'd really like to have. Again, not because I really played it very much at all. In fact, I've barely installed it and looked at it, but I think it is one of those going to be one of those major collector's items, because it is pretty darn rare. It's just kind of neat to get a harmonica with it, right? pretty much the only game I know of that would have gotten a musical instrument like that. Then there's the peculiarity of Sim Health, which is not really a game at all. It's got the Markle Foundation on it. So this was a program, kind of game program that was created basically so people could run through some different scenarios, changing different aspects of healthcare and seeing what those effects might be. LGR did a good little overview of that game. I encourage you to check it out. But that's another sim game that I really had no interest in playing, right? Because it wasn't really a fun game. Again, you could hardly call it a game. But, it's part of the collection and worth having. And in fact, I've got a sealed copy of it, which is kind of unusual. And then I've got something that's even more unusual, and that's a slightly older version of the same game. So they actually released a couple different versions, I suppose. Got this gray box version of it, which is slightly older. Came out a year before the blue version, and there's some subtle differences with the box and so forth. It doesn't say a tool for national debate on the side. Yeah, I really don't know. I don't know where that came from, the history. Again, LGR did a video on it. Check that out. All right, so with most of my sim games, sort of my core sim games off to the side here, I wanted to mention some other Maxis games I have, because they did produce other games other than just the core sim games. And some of these they published and didn't actually develop. So I will try to mention those where that comes up. Actually, out of this group, you may or may not know this, but Sim Tower, which of course is one of my favorite games, and considered one of the core sim games, along with SimCity and Sim Farm and so forth, was not developed by Maxis. It was actually produced by Ute Sato, and Maxis somehow picked it up and published it here in the United States. But Ute Tower is the sequel to that game, and I don't think Maxis had anything to do with that game. Okay, so a few other things I want to point out. There were a number of re-releases, bundled re-releases of the Sim games, Sim Classics. This one came with SimCity, Sim Earth, Sim Farm, and it's got a pretty hefty manual in there, and all three of those games. So a number of re-releases. I have some of these in plastic. I'm not going to mention all of them, but I just wanted to point out that there were some bundles, re-release bundles. Streets of SimCity, I didn't have that in my core group there because, well, it's not Sim something, right? But SimCopter, it was an add-on for SimCity, and you could drive around it was SimCity 2000. You could drive around your SimCity 2000 city. That's kind of neat. I did that a little bit. The graphics would be pretty laughable today and so forth, like with SimCopter 2, but I thought it was pretty neat at the time. SimCopter, there's something I want to point out here, and that is there's a version that came with aviators and a version that didn't come with aviators. So this is the version that came with aviators. This is the version that did not come with aviators. I don't know. It's kind of like SimTunes. Some came with a harmonica and some didn't. Same with SimGolf, actually. Some came with golf balls and some didn't come with golf balls. But that's kind of neat. And I wanted to have both versions if possible. And I do. What I don't have, actually, is a sealed copy of SimCopter. And that would be kind of neat to acquire that at some point. Then you have other games that really do follow in the vein of the other Sim games, but weren't titled Sim. So I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but Unnatural Selection is a good example of that. Not a game that I really played very much at all. You just kind of create these creatures. I don't know, kind of, to me when I was a kid, I was like, Sim Life, or Unnatural Selection, it's all creating Sim creature things, messing with DNA and biology and so forth. So I don't know what they would have titled this, if it was Sim something, Sim SimCrete. I don't know. I'm just gonna give up. Maybe that's what happened. They just gave up. Like, we can't title this a sim game because we just can't think of anything good. But yeah, definitely sandbox kind of game. That goes along really well with the other Maxis sim games. You've got other games again that were published by Maxis but not developed by them. This was created by Some Interactive. The Crystal Skull. Yeah, but it has the Maxis logo on there, and I've got it in plastic. Someday I will see what it's all about. Robo Sport. Yeah, this is a pretty early sim game. It was in 1991. And I guess you create robots and stuff, and then you can fight them, and you had actually multi-computer, multiplayer capabilities in 1991. It's kind of impressive. But another game that's kind of sandbox, kind of action game, and at this point, the black box with the yellow ball logo goes along with SimAnt and SimEarth. So that was before they moved on to the kind of colored label, white sim design. I guess that's what they were. That's what they were doing. They were all black boxes. There's no Daring to Fly. This was developed and published by Arnowitz Studios, but it's distributed by Maxis. That's what it was. They didn't really have much to do with this, but I remember this being in their catalog. Daring to Fly. Don't know. Again, someday, take a closer look at that one. Full Tilt Pinball. This was created by Cinematronics, but published by Maxis, and it was actually Full Tilt Pinball is pretty good game. It's pretty fun as far as pinball goes. It's pretty decent pinball games. I think there's a Full Tilt Pinball 2 as well. Elfish. Oh my goodness. So this is another one that was just published by Maxis. They didn't actually create it, but yeah, you create little fish tanks and stuff. I mean, I can see this kind of fitting in with the sandbox games, creating your own fish tank and whatnot. The electronic aquarium. Maybe just didn't have the complexity, I guess, to really call it a sim game. Plus, they didn't create it. But yeah, it's a software toy. It kind of fits in really well with the other games that Maxis was producing at the time. There's another one again that was developed by another company but published by Maxis because it's kind of a fun sandboxy type game, click and play, right? And this actually you could create your own. This is a bit different. You can create your own game. So it's kind of very basic kind of software development suite. And yeah, I remember kind of installing it back in the mid-90s and messing around with it a little bit. I don't think I ever got very far. I don't think I have very good talent for making games. Playing them, yes. Making them, not so much. But that probably inspired a number of modern-day game developers. Here's a software, Toys for Kids. So kids, Maxis software title, Widget Workshop. Again, very much like click and play. Create your own devices of all sorts. And this actually, I'll show you. This actually did come with stuff as well. Came with a number of items, a compass, looks like a magnifying glass, as well as a spinning top, some straws, things. I don't know. It's a whole bunch of stuff. And then there's this. It's a combination of Marty and the Trouble with Cheese, and then I guess the sequel, Marty and Where's Morgan. I don't know. This would have been for little kids, and I was far too old. So ages 2 to 5. Kids can practice their counting skills and so forth. Yeah, so just kind of basic stuff. Again, not created by Maxis, but it was published by them. Let's see, what year was this? 1995, 1996, yeah, so mid-90s. They're really taking on a lot of games that they didn't actually develop themselves, but they published and were really kind of adding to the catalog at that point in time. Now, along that same vein, I almost forgot about these, A-Train, right, which was developed by Ardink, and they did some other games that Maxis went on to publish, yeah, they this was kind of a neat little train and economic simulator where you kind of build trains between cities and watch cities grow, and you're kind of moving around logistics, moving around cargo and things like that. So this was kind of on the other end of the difficulty spectrum for me as a kid. I certainly tried to play this, and it's a pretty complex game, actually, and just wasn't all that fun. I kind of lumped it in with SimHealth. It's like, well, it's kind of a game, but, it's almost too much of a technical simulator to be a whole lot of fun. So, didn't play a lot of it as a kid, but I do have the construction set as well as the game. Which is kind of nice. They went on to produce a number of sequels to A-Train. I think they're on A-Train 10 or something like that now. But so I think they're still producing them. Those games have been around for quite a while, and there's a number of sequels. So there you have it. There's some odds and ends and so forth, and some additions. Like I've got, again, all the editions of SimCity 2000 came with a variety of special editions and things like that. But I didn't want to go through and show them all again since I already produced a video on all of my SimCity copies. And I will link to that video, of course, in the description. So if you want to take a look at that, I do recommend it if you are a fan of SimCity, looking at the different versions. So there are a lot of different versions of SimCity out there. And I certainly don't have all of them, as it turns out. But I have quite a few of them, as well as all of the main copies, of course. So thanks, guys. Thanks very much for watching. I continue to add to this collection, and I'm hoping that eventually, at least of all the main Maxis titles where they did actually produce it themselves, they didn't just publish it, but they actually developed it. I'm hoping to get a sealed copy of all of those eventually. By the way, if I've left out any Maxis games, let me know. There probably are some that I didn't get to and I don't have in my collection. So let me know, especially if the sim game somehow I left that off. So I know there's some fringe sim games out there, some of which never got an official release. So I didn't include those because, well, if they didn't have a physical box, I don't have them in my collection. So, but let me know, and thanks again, guys, very much for watching. I hope you come back for the next video.